In order to really step into true devotion and to be a messenger of whatever message is wanting to come through and to reach the people at certain times where they need it, we need to, number one, be so sure of our worth to be a vessel.
Mm.
So much confidence and so much surety that we are worthy as a vessel. And then, secondly, to surrender all ego and shrink down so small that we can ride the particles of the waves of unconditional love through time and space to reach the people that need that message at the time that they need it.
Welcome to the Legendary Podcast, an invitation into intimate, soul-bearing conversations with the gods and goddesses of our Burning Man camp, the legendary playground of the gods. Here, you'll meet the visionaries, wisdom keepers, heart-centered entrepreneurs, and edge walkers who make up this extraordinary soul family. Together, we'll journey through the turning points that shaped us, the failures, the victories, the breakdowns, and the breakthroughs, and what it truly means to rise and build something sacred from the ashes. If you've been searching for your people, if you've longed to find a community that inspires you to rise, you've found your tribe. So join us now for another sacred journey. Welcome to the playground of the gods. Welcome to Legendary. Hello, legends, and welcome back to the Legendary Podcast. Today, I have no other but Miss Mayah Rose, the co-founder of Legendary, who's going to be coming in here, showering us with her magic. I'm just super excited to dive in and with, Gerald's counterpart and see, we've gotten already on the podcast, Gerald's perspective and his view and what he believes to be legendary. And now we're going to the feminine counterpart and seeing what's here. What is underneath the magic of legendary? So Mayah Rose is a modern day priestess, an alchemical guide who awakens visionary leaders to their soul's calling through ancient wisdom, sacred union, and divine feminine codes. Some of you may have even already attended her incredible workshops and experienced her magic firsthand. She co-leads Legendary Retreats, the Psychedelics, Sex, and Superconscious podcast, and obviously Portal-like Burning Man camp with her beloved husband, Gerald. So anyways, without further ado, welcome, Mayah Rose.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be here. This is really fun to offer my perspective and to dive deep into who I am and how this all got started.
Beautiful. Well, tell us, before we do that deep dive, what is actually, there's so many projects that you and Gerald like co-manage together. And what I would love to know is what's alive for you right now? What is it that you're working on in life, business, that's really lighting you up?
Thank you so much for asking. I think at the deepest essence, my work is to help people to be able to create the relationships they love, the life that they love, and really step into what they came here to do. So it's my belief that we all have these missions or soul contracts that we agreed to do before we came. And so
Mhm.
I love the term remembrancer, and that's something that both Gerald and I do, but we do individually and then also together, which is just really helping people remember who they are. So what's alive for me right now, I just got back from Egypt, which was a huge trip and a big portal, and just a reminder of my mission here to help people remember who they are, but then also to really stand as a catalyst for them to remember who they are, for them to awaken to these gifts, these past lifetimes, this like wealth of knowledge that they've gained over the lifetimes that they've lived, and to be able to understand how they get to use that now at this like crucial time on the planet, which the planet is awakening and redefining itself so that we can co-create better with the masculine and feminine, both within us and also in sacred union and divine partnership.
Mhm.
So that's my deepest calling right now. And I do that through the workshops I lead, the women's temple that I steward called Asha for priestesses, and then through the medicine journeys and work that Gerald and I do together as well.
Beautiful. So, something that whenever we're sharing about our life purpose and we're using words a lot, I find it's super, super important for us to get on the same page on what they mean, because the words remember, like you need to remember who you are words that I'm sure you can relate. I've seen plastered on the Instagram, on the website, like spiritualcoach.com. And there's so many different interpretations of what that means. But I want to know from you, my Rose, when you say I'm here to help people remember who they are, if we double click on that, what does that mean to you?
Well, I think a lot of times when we get into these spiritual communities or esoteric communities, or we go to these workshops, these self development workshops, a lot of times people have the mindset of like, I'm going to become something different. And I don't really feel like it's about becoming something different. It's about just deeply remembering at the core of who we are. And I really believe is that we stand together as groups, as we stand with the people who we were meant to come here on this planet together, that as we look at them, as we talk to them, as we see the gifts that they have inside of them, these different codes are awakened within them. There's a great book that's called The Bringers of the Dawn. And
Mm,
in this book, it talks about this concept or this idea that we were sent here at different iterations of lifetimes, different times on the earth, on this planet, to be able to fulfill certain missions together. And the deepest work that we have to do is to remember that we aren't alone, that we were sent here as a collective group to remind each other who we are, to remember our specific role at this time, to step into that role with such confidence and surety because we are surrounding ourselves with people who remember who we are and who know who we are, and then to be able to see their gifts because we can't do it alone. It's taking a
mm,
community, a tribe to be able to do this. So as we remember our roles and remember our place in the community and the group of people who we were sent here to be with, to do this work with, that's where we get to step into the greatest alignment of our purpose. And it really isn't about becoming someone different. It's about remembering how great we are, remembering the codes that we've learned, that we've carried through lifetimes, the past lives that we've lived, the codes that we carry through our ancestors to be able to step fully into what our purpose is now.
beautiful, beautiful. Yeah, it's the remembering who we are, what I'm hearing, and I see all of this in Legendary. Although we're not going there yet. I want to leave it for suspense, but I can see what you're saying in terms of when we as souls remember that we're not alone and we actually actively surround ourselves a tribe with people who are on a similar mission to reactivate our codes and remember our gifts and remember the truth of who we are. It just creates this beautiful portal and vortex where we can actually amplify those gifts and we can support each other as mirrors and seeing one another. I love that. And now that we've clarified what you mean by remember who we are, then my next question for you is, well, who are we?
Well, everybody has their different roles and their different gifts, and that's the great part of it. Is I heard this thing one time that I believe to be so true, and for me, it's been the most true, most powerful, and all the mentoring and coaching and groups I've been in and family relationships I have, and that is when we criticize somebody, their conscience will defend them, right? When we look at them and say, well, you need to be doing this differently, or you should be doing this, or why aren't you doing this? Then we have this part of us that says inside of us, well, you don't know me. You don't know what I'm doing. You don't know why I'm here. But when we compliment somebody, their conscience will compel them. So when we look at somebody and we say, hey, here's the gifts that I see in you. Here's what I see that you're really good at. Here's what I feel when I'm around you. This is what I feel like your gifts are. Then their conscience will compel them to do more of that. And so I think that everybody has a different role, but the real work is for us to stand in front of each other and for us to really see that divinity in one another and to recognize the gifts and to speak to those rather than the things that the person's not doing or they aren't doing right or they should be doing. And as we rise into our gifts, then we really can remember who we are. And I mean, collectively, I think that all of us that are probably listening to this podcast have a collective mission that we want to bring greater light and love to the earth, that we want to do things in a different way, that we want to elevate the consciousness of the planet so that we can co-create together this space that feels more safe for us to express our gifts, that feels more love for us to be able to see each other, that is non-competitive, but rather collaborative as we co-elevate and coexist together.
Mhm. Beautiful. Thank you. You know, as you're sharing your philosophy, which has so deeply shaped, I mean, literally co created Legendary and everything that it stands for. What makes me most curious is, you share, there's been bits and pieces as you and I have spoken I know that your mother, and I also know that you had a different name and you've been married before, and so there's just like these little bits and pieces of the past version of Maya Rose that built you up into who you are today. But to get to the place where you're an embodiment of this modern day priestess, and you have these codes and you have this vision about supporting the planet on a really big level, and not only that, but actually taking big action towards it, for you to get to this place, behind that is a story of where you came from. And so I'm really curious about, I guess, Maya Rose before Maya Rose, and if you could share a bit about your childhood and your background, and what is it that you believe, because you're highly self-aware, you've done the work. So from your perspective, how do you see yourself having gotten to this place where you're co-creating so much for the planet and all of these incredible philosophies that you're sharing?
Well, thank you so much. I think that each of us is born into the perfect circumstances to be able to help us cultivate who we are. And as we commit and are devoted to the path, then those things can bring that forward within us. So for me, I grew up in the oldest of five, a very conservative home. With really loving parents, but a really strict religion and set of philosophies. I grew up in kind of a small town, and my dad was local celebrity. And so I was the oldest child. My dad's a local celebrity, had all these rules or these ways that I was supposed to be living, the ways that I was supposed to show up. So I had this very fun and open childhood in certain ways where I got to go play. I grew up before the time when, parents were really worried about their children roaming the neighborhoods. I got to roam the neighborhood. I had friends that I played with. I remember feeling very connected to nature and connected to energy and feeling a lot of emotions. And there were also some challenges with that too. First of all, my parents didn't always know what to do with me. I felt a lot. And so they would say things to me like, you don't need to be worried about that. You shouldn't be scared about that. Oh, trees don't have feelings, things like that. And so the story that I got about myself was that I needed to be somebody different, that I wasn't okay being who I was. And so I really developed through my teenage years and then early adulthood this idea of being able to put on this mask, of being performative, of showing up how everybody else wanted me to show up. So
Mhm.
dressing the way I was supposed to dress and acting the way I was supposed to act and doing the things I was supposed to do. And in fact, and it was all out of love. And again, my parents are extraordinary and they played an excellent role in my life. They've been great teachers in many areas. And one thing they told me, even before marrying my husband at 19, was that I had OCD when I was a teenager, and you don't need to share that with your husband because, he might worry or he might think you're broken or he might think there's something wrong with you. So I went into this relationship with my first husband with this idea that if I showed up as all of me, if I showed up as who I was, that I would be accepted. And so I got really good at wearing this mask and got really good at fitting into this role of who I should be. But I always had this part of me that was slightly rebellious, and this part of me that was really curious about these spiritual principles and things that didn't always fit into my religion. Well, I got married at 19. I had all four of my kids before I was 26. I was doing the thing I was supposed to do, right? I was doing the thing. I was getting married. I was creating a family. And I'm so glad I got to do that at a young age. And there were some certain challenges around that too that helped shape who I am. For example, I remember being 23 years old and my ex-husband was struggling with a potentially life-threatening disease. I was pregnant with my third child. We just graduated from college and had no money. So here I'm as 23-year-old with two young children, a toddler and basically a baby, and pregnant with my third and having to figure out how we were going to survive, returning Christmas presents to buy diapers, serving tuna on toast, which is like stale bread toasted up with a can of tuna and you make some gravy with it, to my kids so they could eat, and really just like having to figure out how to create and provide for my family, how to hold things together so that in a sense it developed the strength within me. But it was really interesting because as I continued on the path, I found some things that helped awaken more of the energetic things within me, so more of these natural gifts. It began with foot zoning and then developed into Reiki and becoming a Reiki master. And as I opened up to more of the energetic field around me, I started also awakening to my purpose. And one day I remember just realizing that I felt like the things I was teaching through these classes and these seminars that I was leading through energy and through foot zoning, that there were core principles that were really changing people's lives. The principles of energy, the principles of, choice and accountability, the principles of how to be able to really be the creator of your life. And I remember one day lying in my master bedroom and after yoga, doing Shavasana and just saying, okay, God, universe, spirit, I just want to be an instrument in your hands. And at the time, I was basically a stay at home mom slash closet entrepreneur because I had a lot of shame around earning money when I was supposed to be a stay at home mom, but I was doing that so that we could survive during the, 2008, the crash of the market and everything. And as I laid there and just said, use me as an instrument in your hands, the most incredible thing happened within the next 9 months. I found myself going from a reach of 2,000 people to 2 million people per month. I got my own TV show, radio show, part owner of a radio station. I was doing red carpet interviews outside of a Walt Disney Concert Hall in LA, my second time ever there, with people like John Travolta and Halle Berry. And this whole new world opened up. I published a book, and it was in a very short period of time. And so I really understood the power of what it meant to be an instrument. But during that time, I also lost myself. So as I developed and became and stepped more into these powers that I had, this alignment with the mission that I had, I also the things started falling away that didn't align, like my marriage and the religion that I'd grown up in. And I went through this time where I was experiencing what looked like a lot of success on the outside, but I was really struggling on the inside because all of these things that I built my foundation and my life on were all falling away. And
Mm,
so I remember I kind of lost focus of my goal and my mission for a while. And instead, because I felt so much shame and heartache and trying to figure those things out, that I would just feel miserable about myself. So I'd chase, what's the next big award I can get? What's the next big celebrity that I can meet? What's the next big client that I can have? And so I kind of teetered into this place of chasing the next thing that would help me feel good. And in that, I kind of lost myself and hit rock bottom and was on antidepressants for situational depression and was feeling like I didn't want to live or continue on anymore in the way I was going. And it was during that moment of breakdown that I climbed to a mountain by my house where I was living in Arizona at the time, and wrote myself this letter from God and just said in the letter, "What do you want from me?" And the first phrase that I heard was, "It's not what I want from you, it's what I want for you. You
mm,
asked to be in deepest alignment and service, and here are the things that need to happen for you to be able to do that." And I remember hiking down off that mountain, knowing that I needed to leave the religion I'd grown up in, knowing that I needed to divorce the man that I'd been married to and the father of my children, knowing that there were some changes that I needed to make in my life. I was shown the pathway to success, but I had lost my devotion to what was really wanting to be created through me.
mhm,
So as I
mhm,
realigned with that, and did the work around that, which was definitely hard, but it opened up new doorways and gateways, which allowed me to meet Gerald, which allowed me to really deepen into my deeper mission and purpose, which is to help people remember who they are, to help awaken people into their gifts and step into the remembrance of who they are. And so as I did that, it just brought this deepening and knowledge of who I am and the path that I'm on. So, it was a beautiful journey, not necessarily easy, but I'm thankful for every single step of it because it led me to where I am today.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. As you were sharing, I just love the synchronicities of the universe. I was a little late to today's interview because I share with you I was recording another episode, and the title of that episode, this is for my own podcast. It's not what you think, and it was actually I don't have the final title yet, but the theme is from performance to truth. And that
Mhm.
entire episode was breaking down the journey that I witnessed both in my own story as well as with clients and peers of people who are incredible performers and have had like absolute success in their lives, but they lose themselves. Like, you can't make this stuff up, right? And it was really going into this pattern that I've noticed in people who are like really heart led and high impact and high performing, of unconsciously basically putting output, associating output as a way to outsource our sense of worth.
Mm.
And that is the ways that we lose ourselves, betray ourselves, disconnect from, God, source, universe. And it's such a beautiful way that, even in that episode, I was like sharing my story, but I was sharing, this story that I'm sharing about me. There's so many different variations of the story. Everyone has their own unique version of it. Um, and that's their, like, that's what shapes them into who they are. But really what it ultimately comes down to is that at one point we need to wake up to the fact that this a variation of this pattern is running our lives, and we need to make a decision to step into alignment with our soul purpose and to perform from that place, because then it's not really actually performance. It just becomes a result of like who we are authentically. So that's reminding me of something that I was just unpacking, and I love that. And something you shared, Maya Rose, is that you said, you had this moment where you just surrendered and you said, please use me as an instrument, right? And then 9 months later, bam, 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 result, 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 result. I'm really curious about what unfolded within those 9 months that actually, because it's such a really interesting space what you're speaking into of, well, I'm open and I'm here and I'm devoted and it's like, God, use me as your instrument. And yet somehow you still lost yourself. And that's something that happens to so many freaking people. They're like, I had the best intentions. I'm over here like wanting to be of absolute service. Where did I go? Right. So, would you be able to share more about that 9 month period? Like, what happened that actually allowed you to jump? Like, practically, what occurred that allowed you to create the success for yourself? And where in that journey did you begin to lose yourself? And what did that look like?
Yeah, thank you for that. And one thing I want to speak to too that you were talking about, this term has come into my awareness over the past few days called non-performative. What would it look like to live your life in a non-performative way? And so that's something that I've been sitting with a lot. So again, I think it's no coincidence this is popping up for the collective as well. And I think part of being non-performative in regards to your other question is that we have to lose ourselves. There's
Mm,
something that happens when we're a young child, and when I was at Rhythmia, they do a great job of talking about this. Rhythmia is a medically licensed ayahuasca facility down in Costa Rica. They talk about there's this point that happens in your life where there's this, like, splitting of your soul, and then in order to find yourself, you have to merge your soul back together, but it's
mm,
that point in your childhood when you were told that you weren't okay being who you were. Right? That there was something that you were doing that wasn't okay. You're being too loud, you're being too emotional, you're being too whatever that is. And this seed gets planted in our minds that the way we are is not okay. So we have to show up in a different way. So we learn to put on a performance. And this happens to everybody when they're a young child. Well, maybe not children that are autistic. If you haven't seen the telepathy tapes yet, great podcast if you haven't listened to that yet. But anyway, what happens is we get this idea that we have to perform a certain way to be accepted. And so when I laid there and I said, God, yeah, I want to be an instrument in your hands, I think part of my journey was I had to lose myself. Like, that was part of me saying, I want to be an instrument in your hands, was I had to go through a journey of actually losing that part of me that learned how to be performative. And so this whole cycle of what happened was doing just that. And my book that I wrote during that time is called Soul Intuition. And so that's something that I talked a lot about at the beginning of this journey when I, first started speaking and talking a lot and really following the signs. So speaking to what happened in that 9 months and the journey that led me to have the breakdown, the success that led to the breakdown that led me to losing that performative part of myself so that I could really be an instrument in the hands of the divine and creation was this. The first thing that happened was I was just on my computer randomly sifting through junk mail, which I never did. But there was one invitation in junk mail to a mastermind. I was living in Idaho at the time. The mastermind was the next day in Utah. And I saw that, and I'd probably gotten hundreds of invitations like that that I didn't even know about. But for some reason, this mastermind really spoke to me, and I knew I needed to go. So I arranged childcare for my children. I dropped everything because I was following that intuitive knowing within me that I needed to go to this. And by going to that, I met someone there who ended up becoming a mentor of mine, who ended up being the bridge to all of these different opportunities. And I think the other thing with that is I was just willing to say yes. I knew that if I was committing to be an instrument, then I needed to say yes to the opportunities that were coming, and I needed to make those efforts in my life to be where I needed to be. So when opportunity after opportunity came, I didn't have to say yes to all of them, but I did. And that's what led to that quick acceleration. So from meeting this gentleman in the mastermind, I got invited to go to Beverly Hills, which is where I met somebody who invited me to do the TV show, which from that TV show, I then met other people, and one of them was a man who was putting on big celebrity conferences and galas down in LA. And I just had this desire to help, and it wasn't coming from a drive of I wanted anything. I just said, yeah, I want to help you, and I have these connections. And he was looking for speakers, and through the TV show, I had some connections. So I connected him with some amazing speakers, and he said, wow, you've connected me with so many amazing people that I am going to offer you the opportunity to come and do interviews on the red carpet. And he's like, but you need to provide your own TV crew. Well, I'm like, I don't know how could I find a TV crew? And I'd heard of this one place, Voice America, and they had a radio, and they were trying to get into TV, and I'd had a connection with them through one of the events that I said yes to. So I called them and I said, listen, I can't really pay for you to come and do this, but if you come and do this, I can try and negotiate. Maybe you can do some of the interviews with the celebrities, which might help your TV station. So they agreed, and they came and they did interviews, me interviewing people. And then they also got to do some interviews. And they were so grateful that they said, we just want to offer you an opportunity to co-create a radio station. And we want to give you your own show as long as you just keep interviewing amazing people and introducing us to people. So a lot of that came from what I call my desire to give, serve, and share. Just to be able to give freely, to serve people, and to share without expectation. So a lot of the things that happened came from that. And how I lost myself, which again I think is perfect on the whole journey, was there was such a discrepancy between how I was living, where I wasn't being seen, where I wasn't allowed to speak in church anymore, where I had so much shame around how I was showing up in my marriage, that I was then seeking for more validation. And so I was seeking for it in these other ways. And I think it was my soul's cry to really feel seen and feel worthy in my gifts. But I had to experience that discrepancy. And part of what I lost was the core things that made me happy. So, but the great thing about all of that was, in losing myself, was that led me later on to when Gerald and I went to our first Joe Dispenza event. I had some great meditations and some visions, and was meditating afterwards, and had this, I was really contemplating on, how do we, especially as women, and women that have been raised in a way to be supporters to our husbands, or to be stay-at-home moms, or to show up in a certain way that really fostered codependency, how can we step into this highest version of ourselves? And it was at that time that this whole course downloaded to me, that I've been teaching for years now, and helping women really find within themselves what creates the life that they love, the businesses that they love, and the relationships they love. And so, um, yeah, so I think it's all just a journey, but I think that was my journey of losing myself was really necessary in order for me to be that instrument. And one other thing I'll mention too, because I think this is really powerful. I owned a publishing company for years, for speakers as well. And one day I was doing this psilocybin journey, And I just really wanted to know. I was contemplating, like, how is it that some authors, that some people just seem to their message reaches people at the exact right time that they need it, right? Like, for me, one of those people is Wayne Dyer, and he's no longer in this physical body on this earth, but it seems like his content at that time, especially, was really helping me. And I would just find things, and I would read his books, and I'd be like, "Wow, this is really inspiring me." So during that medicine journey, I just asked, I said, "How is it that some people are able to reach their audience beyond time and space to really impact them?" And the answer I got was really phenomenal. And I had these different people appear to me that have written different books and made different impacts. And the message was this: in order to really step into true devotion and to be a messenger of whatever message is wanting to come through and to reach the people at certain times where they need it, we need to, number one, be so sure of our worth to be a vessel. So
Mhm.
have so much confidence and so much surety that we are worthy as a vessel. And then, secondly, to surrender all ego and shrink down so small that we can ride the particles of the waves of unconditional love through time and space to reach the people that need that message at the time that they need it. And so I think through that whole process of really, like, having all this, these eyeballs on me and having all this success and then losing myself, that was also the process of building that worth within myself and really challenging, like, am I worthy of this? But then also creating an opportunity for me to let go of anything that I thought I was, to be able to shrink down so small to just ride these waves or these particles of unconditional love.
Mhm. Beautiful. You know what I love about what you're sharing? It is so in the collective. In the episode I had just recorded, one of the things that I share is that the antidote to performance is self worth. And when we actually stop outsourcing our worth to our output, then it leaves us with, that loss and that, oh my God, who am I then? Who am I without this? Everything comes crumbling down. And then what? And that creates an incredible window of opportunity, like you said, to lose ourselves, to then look at ourselves and actually be like, feel and embody the worthiness of who we already are. And from that place, it's just a matter of listening to soul impulse, which, what you share, that intuitive hit, like I need to go here, I need to be there. And we do so because we create space. And, one of the other things that I love about what you're saying, it just really reminds me of the love that I have for my work when it comes to storytelling and helping people tell their story, because I view storytelling as a living transmission. The most potent way that we can share our story is by allowing it to be a living transmission. And we do that by integrating the actual story, by digesting it. So, even when you're sharing the clarity of your story, it's really just your story is a vessel to really convey all of the codes that you hold, for the woman that you've become and what you now have to teach. Because all of these things around, growing up the way that you did, and then having children, like 4 freaking kids before the age of 26, which is incredible, and dealing with what you needed to deal with, and not having money, and then going up that mountain, and surrendering yourself and asking for help and receiving it, but then losing yourself, and then finding way to alignment. All of that is just a blueprint to really of everything that your soul is here to learn. And it's beautiful. So thank you so much for sharing. And I'm curious about, okay, so you went up that mountain, you came down, you divorced the father of your children, you walked away from religion, and you had a whole journey come through up until the moment where you met Gerald. So I would love to know, like, what did that look like? And then when the two of you got together, well, we know what the angle is because that's why this podcast is here, but curious to hear the story behind that.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for asking. One other thing I'll mention before I go into that story too is, what I love what you said about the storytelling is, I think when we have a greater devotion to the message that's wanting to come through us that
Mhm.
we do to, attachment to the outcome, that's where when we really can be vessels. So I think
Mhm, mhm. Yeah, because it's stripped of what you said. When we digest the story, there's nothing to play out anymore. There's no more ego. There's no more unprocessed emotions. There's nothing that you need, no chip on your shoulder, no pattern that you need to recreate. Like it's just complete. And all that there's left is a blueprint of who
Mhm.
you get to be, and the pattern that you've actually embodied that you now get to transmit through the embodiment of that story. So yeah, it fits perfectly into this work.
Yeah, well, thank you. And yeah, my story of how I met Gerald, we actually, because of that mastermind that I went to, the one that I was telling you about that I found in my junk mail, I
Mhm.
got connected to a gentleman who ended up being business partners with Gerald. So somehow Gerald and I had become friends on Facebook. And I was doing a big event down in Orange County, and he reached out to me. We were both still married. It was very professional, but he was curious about what I was doing. And I'd seen what he had been doing on social media, so I invited him to come to that event as a guest. It was for speakers and event producers, and he produced events for speakers, so I invited him to come. Um, and and then he reciprocated by inviting me to come and speak at one of his events in Utah. Now, part of my story was that when I went through the whole transition out of my marriage and religion, I'd actually, when I was living in Idaho, been speaking a lot in Utah at a lot of different things that were not necessarily religious conferences, but they were religious conferences. And so when I made that shift in my life, I basically got booted out of all these conferences I was speaking in at Utah. I would get hate texts and people, I can't believe you're doing this and you're a sinner and blah, blah, blah.
Wow.
And so I just had committed. I'm like, I am never going to speak in Utah again. Like, I don't care. I've moved on. I'm on bigger ponds, bigger fishes, speaking internationally now, doing a lot in California, whatever. And so when he invited me to speak at Utah, I just told him, I'm like, "Oh, I don't speak in Utah." And he said, asked why. And I said, "The people there are way too judgmental." And he said, "Well, I live here, and I know a lot of people that live here that aren't you being judgmental of the people that are living in Utah?" And I was like, "Damn it, he's right." So I went and spoke at his event in Utah, and actually it was really healing for my soul. And then fast forward a few months later, I was doing another event down in LA, had to extend an invitation. He ended up at that event, and we ended up talking at lunch. And as we were talking at lunch, he said, "I don't know why, but I really feel like I need to share this with somebody. I just filed for divorce last week." And I'm like, "Oh, I just filed for divorce last week too. That's interesting." And so I was at the end of a 20-year marriage, almost 20-year marriage. He was just went through his second divorce. We were both in a place where neither of us were interested in any kind of relationship. We're like, okay, we're going to be good for a while. I was in this place of I'm just going to explore on my own, see what comes and focus on my kids, focus on my career. He was in this place of I never want to be married again or probably even in a relationship. I don't have this woman thing figured out. I think I'm better on my own. But as we were talking at lunch later, we returned to the event. I remember just sending him a text. I'm like, "Hey, maybe we should go out and celebrate tonight." And so he found this Burning Man reunion party on Venice Beach, which neither of us had been to Burning Man before. And he's like, "Why don't we just go hang out at this Venice Beach Burning Man reunion party?" So we ended up going there, and I remember like seeing fire spinners. I'm like, "Oh, this is fun." And we ended up in the tent of somebody named Rainbow Dave drinking some kind of tea, which I was like, "Well, I don't know what I'm drinking, but I hope it's like herbal tea." He's like, he said it was. So, but anyway, we just had this great time. And then afterwards, it was a time when they still allowed the bird scooters on the Venice Beach boardwalk. They don't anymore. But Gerald had rented this bird scooter and he got on it and he scooted over to me. And I remember he's on the scooter and he just reached down his hand. He said, "Do you trust me?" It was just like Aladdin. And in that moment, I had some things going on inside of me. First of all, I'm like, well, this is a guy, like we're in Venice Beach. Am I going to get on a bird scooter with him? Like this part of me that was more cautious never would have said yes, but something in my soul said, "Okay, you can trust him." So I said yes. And I remember I stepped on the scooter, and as soon as my back pressed into his chest, I had the most interesting experience. It was like my whole soul surrendered. And for the first time in my life, I felt trust. Like I felt being held just in the
Mhm.
energy of the masculine. And it kind of caught me off guard. But we continued and had an amazing rest of the day. And then I was supposed to fly out the next day. I ended up delaying my flight so we could go out again. And there was a bunch of chemistry between us, but we were wanting to honor, the completion of our divorces. So there was nothing sexual that happened yet. But we just ended up having this connection. And I was living in Arizona, he was living in Utah, and so we just kind of committed that we would just enjoy the moment. that there would be no expectations, that when we were together, we'd have fun. We'd be together if we wanted to be together. If we didn't, we wouldn't. There was going to be no commitments, whatever. And so that was how we met. And that was the foundation of our relationship, is just
Mm.
committing to ourselves to be in the moment and to um, just honor whatever was alive in the moment, which led us to where we are today.
Wow, what a beautiful story. I love hearing your story because I've heard like bits and pieces of the story, either from you, from Gerald, and it's like never like one clean beginning to end narrative. And I remember even last month he was sharing like another like micro story about the two of you meeting, and how like he had gone through a really difficult marriage, and then I don't even know, a few days later, I guess, then like you entered his life, and the way he was describing like his state at the time was, yeah, like frazzled and like very imperfect. And I didn't feel like, what I love about your story is that you put your back on his chest and you felt safe, masculine energy. I even get truth bumps when I'm sharing this. And he himself maybe didn't even, um, you know what I mean? Like he was still kind of like, ah, like didn't even realize that of himself. You know what I mean? In that moment. And I don't mean to put like words in his mouth or anything, but like when I'm piecing the two narratives together and I can see him telling his story about being like, oh, what's going on? But then you feeling this deep sense of trust and safety in your soul that superseded what the two personalities were going through in that moment. It just basically overrid the actual human situation that was going on. So I'm really curious about, you know, um, yeah, like how that played out, of because I'm assuming that it was a journey of, yeah, him seeing the king within himself and then you awakening to the priestess. I'm curious about how that played out in your relationship, especially given that one of the things you teach about is sacred union, and what that means to you, like up until the point where you decided to create Legendary, which is a different question. So pause at that place because I have more questions for you there. But yeah, let us in on how that played out up until the point where Legendary was born.
Yeah, well, first of all, I think it's important, and I want to put this out there because a lot of women that are powerful leaders that have these powerful priestess capacities within them, they'll ask me like, how do I find my divine union? What should I be looking for? And I always tell them it's not any kind of a list that you're creating. It's not what you should be looking for. It's what you should be feeling. And you'll
Mm,
know if somebody has that potential because when you're in their field, you'll feel held. And the truth is, in my case, is that I'm a big energy. Like I can feel a lot of emotions. I can, hold a lot of energy. I can create a lot of energy. And not everybody is going to be a good match for me. So that was really beautiful to like feel that experience. Some really profound things that happened on our journey was, of course, we started just talking on the phone first. And one of our first phone conversations, Gerald just began the phone conversation by saying, "Here's all the things I don't want you to know about me."
I love
And
that. Yeah, I
yeah,
love
and
that
he was kind of at the point where he's like, "Okay, I don't wanna wear a mask anymore. I'm just gonna lay it all out there, and if you still wanna date me, fine. If you don't, fine." But the most extraordinary thing happened is he shared all those things with me from his past or where he was at currently. It created more trust within me, and I think this thing happens, especially with highly intuitive women, and this happens with me where I can sense when somebody's holding back or hiding something, and then I start to create stories in my head about why. And the stories aren't true, but the feeling of them holding back or not sharing is true. And so it creates this dissonance a lot of times in relationships. And what happened was there was a full resonance. His ability just to be able to open up and be fully open allowed for me to be like, oh, I can trust him. And so it created this deep level of trust. And when we started dating, it was fun because we were like, oh, let's do this, let's do that. And we ended up spending almost all of our time together when I didn't have my kids and he didn't have his kids. And we started by collabing and doing some retreats together. And I would go help him with his events and he would come help me with my events. And so it was just an excuse to be together, but it was also this way of like working together. And then, as this relationship grew, another pivotal moment was, we weren't in a committed relationship. I had been dating 4 or 5 guys at the same time. I was dating Gerald at the beginning, and he was dating multiple people. And then at one point in my life, it was just like, "You know what? I'm a single mom running a business, and I just don't have time. I don't have time to date all these people. My favorite one's Gerald, so I'm just gonna date him." And I had a conversation where I said, "Hey, I don't, I know that we aren't doing the committed thing right now, but I just want you to know you're the only person that I'm choosing to date because I just don't have time." And he was like, "Great." And I remember one time he told me he had gone on a date with another woman, and the next morning I talked to him and I could just sense there was something kind of weird. And so I talked to him, and he just, again, he didn't do anything wrong, but he mentioned that he'd slept with her. And it really like impacted and kind of hurt me. And he could also tell that. And so we had this conversation where he's like, "Well, why don't you come up with a set of rules or things, a list of things that, rules for our relationship that would kind of help you feel safe, things you want me to do differently." And I remember just sitting with that all day, and I wrote a couple of different iterations with rules like, well, maybe if we're still dating in this way, like you can go on dates with other people, but you can't sleep with them, or you can these other people, we can't hold their hands, or maybe we could like, and all of these letters that it's just like, it just didn't feel right. It was about him changing and like rules that we wanted to place in a relationship. And I went to bed that night still not satisfied with any of the versions of the letters I'd written. And I remember I woke up at 3 a.m. and it was almost like I was in this trance and I just wrote this whole letter. And I woke up the next morning and read it, and I'm like, "Oh, this is the one I need to send it." And I sent it to him. And that was like a pivotal shift in our relationship because what I ended up writing in the letter was, "I love you just the way you are, and I don't want you to change. And I don't want there to be, these rules or these limitations. I only want there to be expansion. And why would I mess with perfection? Because I feel like, you are just this perfect divine masculine, and if that leads us to being together, great, and if not, that's okay too, but I don't wanna to limit this." And, I sent that letter, and he ended up calling me that day, and he's like, "All right, I wanna be in a committed relationship, like, thank you for sending that, for seeing me. It makes me emotional even to think about it because it was really hard to send, but it was the truth." And
Mm.
I think that,
Why was it hard to send though?
well, there was a part of me that wanted to control things. There was a part of me that was, like, afraid, like, what if I didn't put limits on it and he didn't choose me, or he ended up in his state, like, not wanting to be with me or whatever. And I think there's this thing that happens where when we try and put rules or limitations or boundaries on things, we feel like we're controlling them, but it's actually, um creating not a safe container, but a container that doesn't allow expansion. I think there's a time and a place to create those in coupleships and things like that, but, um, in talking to our mutual friend Tony, who had kinda been talking to us both individually, and he had been friends with Gerald for a long time and had seen him through different relationships and things, is that he said, at the core level, what Gerald really desired was freedom and expansion and was looking for someone who could accept all of him for the way he was. And, looking back, Gerald also said, "Well, maybe this was like a subconscious test of could we be together?" And and the most interesting thing happened because in doing that, it actually created deeper devotion and commitment in
Mm.
allowing him his freedom to choice and not trying to tell him what to do. So that was like a really pivotal moment in our relationship, and that's when we, first decided to be committed and deep in the relationship, and it was based on this honesty. It was based on radical intimacy. It was based on me opening up and sharing my feelings, but then also really digging deep and being like, "What do I really want?" I just really want Gerald to be all of him. And for
Mm.
him to dig deep and say, "Well, what do I really want? Wow, I actually really want to be with Maya Rose, and she's not gonna try and, contain me." So that was a pivotal moment. And then, another one was, just pre-COVID, I still had 2 sons in high school down in Arizona, and Gerald was living in Utah. Again, we were just kinda doing the long distance thing, and it's just kinda like, "Whatever, it'll last for however long." But I got this strong intuitive feeling that I needed to move to Utah, and this was actually before the letter thing, so it was before we were fully committed, and, so I'm going a little bit out of order here, but I just knew that I couldn't base it on him, like, Like, I didn't know if I was meant to move to Utah to be together with him, but I knew I was supposed to move there, and I also knew that my sons would probably choose to stay in Arizona, and it would be one of the hardest choices that I ever made, but it was so strong within my soul that I knew I needed to move there. So I remember calling him one day and saying, "Hey, I need to move to Utah. I'm gonna move there." And at the time, he was in his recovery from his divorce. He was living in his mom's basement still, and, like, having his mom do his laundry and stuff, and I'm like, "I don't know what's gonna happen, but I have to make this choice for me," and he was surprised, kinda left it. And then, a couple weeks later, he called and he's like, "Well, if you're gonna move to Utah anyway, then we may as well move in together." And I'm like, "Wow, great idea." And so, but what happened was I didn't know COVID was gonna happen at that time, and my whole individual business at that time was based on live events and different things, and so we have been doing some together, but when I made that decision to move to Utah and put things into place, just before then, we had gone on a trip to Nepal that we were co-facilitating. We arrived at Nepal 3 days before they shut the borders due to COVID, and we were arrived back in the U.S. one day before they shut the border to the U.S. due to COVID. So we knew that something was happening, and on the way back from that trip, and knowing I was going to move to Utah, we had a layover in Turkey. We had to reroute through Turkey, and we ended up doing a journey together and really diving into like what's going to happen, what should we do, and got the feeling we were supposed to hold an event with thousands of people.
Wow.
And that didn't make any sense because we had just found out we were at the time we were part of the Tony Robbins program, and we're doing parties pre Tony Robbins events and masterminds afterwards. And we just found out like the whole UPW had gotten canceled in California, like all live events were shutting down. But we leaned into that, and as we got back and as I prepared to move to Utah, we had a meeting with our team, and one of our team members suggested doing a virtual like event on Zoom, which hardly anybody was using Zoom. He's like, "Why don't we do a challenge, like a 6-day or 7-day challenge on Zoom?" And so we leaned into that, and we put the invitation out, and it just at the beginning of COVID, and as I moved to be with Gerald, and it turned out that we had thousands of people from all over the world sign up for this. And it was meant to be like a 20-minute like soul activation at the beginning of each day. And we ended up opening the room up all day, and people would come and they would teach classes. And we had amazing people like Sharon Lecter and Les Brown, come and do classes on there. And then we had other people that were, one lady played the piano and she did a musical performance for an hour. And we'd have people like totally isolated in their living rooms alone that would come and just be on all day, just tears streaming down their face. It was like the only human connection they had, and that was really the foundation of building the tribe that we had now, and also me moving to Utah allowed for me to thrive in my business. I don't know what would have happened had I not made that move, and allowed us for us to deepen our connection and to work together even more. So even though it was like a hard decision and took some healing with my kids and eventually bought another house down there and kind of split our time, um, it was just deepening into that knowing and leaning into things that were even hard and created this space of where we are today.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing. I love hearing the adventure of the story behind the story. And, when I interviewed Gerald in the other episode, he was speaking about, you know, how did Legendary come to be? And he was sharing about how, a little bit about you two working together and how you went to Burning Man together. And there was one point where there was this creative spark, and he turned to you and said, I want to do something. Like, I want to organize my own community in the next year. And then boom, like the rest is history, right? And so I'm super, like, I would love to hear your side of the story as you saw him turn to you and he said those things. And, we know like how it unfolded in terms of he's already shared the story of the years and how it came to be what it is. But I would love to, as a co-founder, I would love to hear what was your perspective of Legendary, how it came to be, and, how it's been unfolding up until today.
Yeah, well, it was a beautiful journey, right from the beginning of Gerald and I meeting. We started merging and supporting each other in each other's events. And then through the, beginning of COVID, starting our own really tribe of people through those virtual events that we did at the beginning of COVID. And but prior to that, so when we were still dating and supporting each other in each other's events, Gerald mentioned Burning Man, and my daughter just happened to be getting married the week before Burning Man, and all of her, like, receptions and everything were the weekend before Burning Man, so I was like, sounds fun, I like to try new things with you, like, let's go play, sure, I'm open to that, but you're gonna have to prepare everything because 'cause I'm not gonna have time." So he got the RV, he even bought me most of my outfits, and, it was fun going to Burning Man that year because I was driving from Boise and meeting him in Winnemucca, and he was driving the RV up from Salt Lake, and I remember getting in the RV, and we were just having a fun time, and we got right to the turnoff, to go to Black Rock City at Gerlach, and he's like, "Oh my gosh." I was like, "What's wrong?" Because Gerald never, like, he never reacts that way. He's like, "I forgot the tickets at my mom's house in Salt Lake." And I'm like, "Oh, just, just have her text a picture." And he's like, "No, we can't do that." And so we ended up having to turn around, drive back to Winnemucca, get in my car, drive all the way back to Salt Lake, grab the tickets. But it was beautiful because we ended up going out to dinner that night and bumping into a woman who Gerald had known who was really struggling and even thinking about taking her own life. And we were able to like really hold her in that and shift some of her perspective. So I really believe that was why we need to go back. But anyway, we got the tickets, drove back to Winnemucca, got the RV, drove into Burning Man. And yeah, it was a really phenomenal experience. And you've been so like the first time you're on the playa, it's like, what's going on? And I remember this feeling of just, like, being 2 kids playing, We would just go out and we would play and we would explore and we would dress up and we would have fun and we'd be like, "Where are we gonna go now? What are we gonna explore? Where are we gonna go experiment?" And I remember on one of our journeys, Gerald said to me, he's like, "Next time I come back, I'm gonna be leading a Burning Man camp." And I'm like, "Okay, all right, let's see. I no doubt you can, create that and do that, but yeah, it sounds like a lot of work." I really didn't know what it involved or entailed. And then fast forward, COVID happened. So the next year, no Burning Man, but the year after was the rug burn. And I actually had an event, so I didn't come till halfway through. So it was really like Gerald's like experiment of like trying things and how's this gonna look and what are the toilets gonna look like. And I remember rolling up halfway through and I was so proud because our tent, which doesn't seem very big compared to like the full production Burning Man, was like the center of this rogue burn. And it was like the centerpiece of where everybody went for workshops. And just remember having this like moment of pride and just delight in seeing that all come together. And yeah, it's evolved through the years, but I think that for me, I loved it, and I was, like, really proud of Gerald, wanting to do that and creating that, and, totally on board with supporting him and helping him, and also, I feel like, if I'm totally being honest, I feel like there's a part of me that's just like, "Hmm, it's kind of fun. I wonder if we're gonna be able to just, like, go be kids on the playa if we're holding space for, an entire Burning Man camp." So that's been also fun to balance out over the years as well.
Yeah, I mean, it is a huge responsibility, and he shared with us on the podcast about just how you be out there holding it down with the energetic grids and like you fellow priestesses just locking it down energetically. So now, okay, so legendary. I would love to hear from your perspective what this camp means to you. What does it represent? Um, and what is its role on the playa?
Mm. Well, going back to everything we've talked about, number one, it's a space where people with shared purpose and mission can come together and remember who they are, both for themselves in the ways that they dress and show up, but also just to get to hold space for each other, to show up in a space where we really get to see each other in our greatest form, in our greatness, in the gods and goddesses that we are, in the remembrancers that we are, and helping each other remember our own greatness. Um, Secondly, it's non-performative. Like Burning Man in general is non-performative, but the whole basis of the camp is where all these people can come that have big energies, they've done big things, but it's not about what they've done. It's just about who they are and how they show up. And it really provides this space of deepening into self-understanding and self-worth and what it means to show up in a community and how you want to show up, not based on how anybody else thinks you should show up or what you should do. So it's this space of cultivating a deeper understanding of who we all are together. And then, the other thing about it is I think our camp is really special because it's just highly curated. Like one of the jobs that Gerald has and that Gerald and I have is really making sure that everybody that comes into the camp gets to be in that space of being a remembrancer and also in the remembering. So we really just highly curate in the camp. Like, don't want anybody in the camp that's there to get anything or that's there because they want to meet somebody, so that they can grow their business. I mean, that happens naturally, but there's none of that. We want to make sure that everybody's vibrational frequency is at a high level and a high state. Um, so that when people are out in the playa and they find all these different things and go through these journeys, I mean, Burning Man's like a big medicine journey. They can return to our camp and they can feel like they're coming home. It's like this place
Mhm.
for integration. It's this place for feeling loved. It's this place to feel safe and protected, safe in who you are, not being judged, safe in, knowing that you'll be taken care of, safe in the remembrancing and the being seen. And I think that's so important and so crucial for Burning Man as well. So, yeah, so that's what the camp means to me.
Oh gosh, I love it. And as you're describing it, you really remind me of how I felt when I was there. And this is something that I also shared in, my episode with Gerald, is that I felt just God, it was just overwhelming. It was a lot of information. As an empath, sensitive, I was just like, wow, there's a lot of information. There's a lot of data floating around. And I remember just kind of going out and being like, whoa, there's a lot going on here. Okay, absorb, absorb, learn, learn, learn. And then I would just retreat. And I actually spent, it was my first burn. I spent a fair amount of time um, within the energetic field of the camp because my nervous system felt at ease there. I felt safe and held. It was a place where I could rest and repair from all of the maybe learning and doing that was happening outside of that area. And I love what you shared as well because the everyone in the camp is so freaking high caliber. I mean, and that's why even we have this podcast because every person is just what? Like, what do you mean this is your life? It's just every single conversation I've even had this far is just blowing my mind. I'm not surprised. I knew this was going to happen simply but because of the energetic texture of what unfolds in the camp. But yeah, this is what I love about even going back to that conversation around being non-performative is that you have these incredible people, but it's not about the networking. It's not about what can I get from this or how can I network my way or what business deal. Um, that's just not present the way that I have noticed it. I mean, I speak from personal experience. I also was in the Tony Robbins Platt. I've also been in these circles, mastermind things where there's really incredible, impressive people, and there's like this energy. Who do I get next to energy? And yeah, I love that about the camp is just this. Okay, I can lean back and I can be who I am as I am. There's no pressure. There's no need to be someone that I'm not. Um, and in that relaxing, we do get to see each other in a much deeper way.
Mhm.
It is incredibly beautiful.
Yeah, and it's my deepest hope and wish for everybody in the camp to just come and be able to feel held. And I think that there's a lot of unique qualifiers that Gerald and I have that allow us to do this. First of all, being the parents to 10 kids and grandparents to one, and we both grew up in really big families. And the religion we grew up in too was all about community, which was great to prepare us for this, but it's all about holding a space and love. And I remember too, one of my superpowers I was taught during an ayahuasca journey, and this again down at Rhythmia in Costa Rica. One of the questions asked was, what is my purpose? And as I went into the ceremony asking, what is my purpose? I remember the moment it came and it was like, your purpose is love. And I was like, all right, what do I do with that? What's my business plan? Like, how do I move forward? And it's like, love. And what I learned through that was just that I have a deep capacity and ability to hold spaces in love, and that is my superpower, and Gerald as well. And so when we come together and create this camp, like, we really work hard. And you mentioned, like, I create an entire energetic grid around the camp, and it's just all about being held and being held in love. And I think so many of the people that come into the camp are so used to holding space for other people, and they hold space all year long, but who gets to hold space for them?
Mm,
And so it's my deepest wish that they have one place at least where they get to come and just feel held in a community and don't have to be on, don't have to perform, don't have to show up and always be the one doing the holding of space, but they just get to be held, even if it's just for that week where they feel like that this is a time where they can held and be surrendered and be loved and be whoever they are in total non-judgment and and get to express however they want to express. So
when
that's
you're
my deepest hope and desire for the people in the camp that they get to feel that.
beautiful. I love that. And what an incredible gift to receive, to be able to just veg out, you know? It even makes me think about, I don't know why this metaphor is coming to place. It's kind of silly, but here it comes. You know, that feeling when um you like come home from school and you go to your parents' house operating under the context that you have a healthy home to come home to, and you just like sit around in your pajamas and you just like eat the food and you don't have to do anything. You can just like be on the couch, veg out. But of course that's not all that happens in Burning Man, because at the end of the day, every single person is just a freaking superhero and they're out there just healing and creating and being and just, you
Mhm.
know, moving. Magic happens. But I think that metaphor comes through because, and you're also just allowed to vegetate and exist and be in your metaphorical or literal pajamas if that's what you want to do. And that's what I really love about that permission to just be seen and held in, like, from like I'm in my PJs and I need to eat snacks and leave me alone, all the way to I am this superhero and I have these incredible gifts, like hear me roar, and everything in between is totally acceptable. So I
Yeah, and it's also a fun place too where we offer the workshops for I love watching people, like, test new edges
yeah.
and, things that might be acceptable at Burning Man, but not anywhere else, like, they get to really show up in their fullness, so
Mhm.
that's fun too as people get to feel safe to explore those edges.
Definitely makes me wanna rethink my outfits now, because at first I was like, oh, I gotta wear outfits." It was from last year, it was coming from a place of obligation of, like, just need to, like, buy things because it was my first burn, but one of the things I'm really excited about is just to be in what I would actually in the simplicity of what I would wear. So anyway, fun little caveat. So, as we begin to wrap up today's interview, Maya Rose, that was a phenomenal story. Thank you so much. I learned so much about you, as I'm sure everyone who's listening did. I would love to ask the question that I'm going to be asking in every episode, which is, what does legendary mean to you?
Mm. Legendary, like the word means to me or you mean our camp?
Oh my gosh, you're so funny. I just interviewed Leor from our camp, and he asked the same exact question. So I'm going to say to you, what I said to him, which is, I won't say.
Mm.
Whatever you feel.
Yeah, legendary means to me it's the ability and space within ourselves and also within groups to be able to show up at our fullest potential, to have the permission to be all of ourselves exactly as we are and to create exactly what we want. So that to me is how we create a legendary life, a legendary tribe, and legendary moments each moment of our life.
Beautiful. Wonderful. Well, as we close up, are there any final words of wisdom as the co founder, matriarch of the tribe that you want to leave us with?
Mm, just breathing into that for a
Or it can
moment.
be silly,
Mm.
doesn't have no pressure for it to be wisdom. But
Well, I think like the just the final message that's coming through right now to me is just a reminder to show up fully as yourself, to not hold back because the world needs you now just as you are, and you aren't too much. And how you are is just perfect and you aren't too little. Like, you giving yourself permission to be exactly as you are, to feel as you are, to speak in your power, to show up in your playfulness and your pleasure, and also show up in your sorrow and your pain and your grief, and it all, like, all of it's welcome. So, just remember to be you.
beautiful. Thank you so much for joining us today. And yeah, there she is, folks. And I'll see you at the playa.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you for walking with us through the fires of remembrance. If today's story stirred something in your soul, share it with a fellow god or goddess. Subscribe to Legendary for more transmissions from our tribe, and may you continue weaving your legend in love and joy. Until next time, stay sovereign, stay sacred, and make it legendary.